Um, Mazzanti Piume and Duccio, I'd love for you to unmute yourself and
Hi, everyone.
Introduce yourself. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm great, thank you. Happy to see everyone on screen. Thanks for the great lecture, Irene. It was really interesting to hear all these stories about feathers and long gone things around the world. And it's a great pleasure to be here with you. Thanks, Isabel, for inviting me. I hope everyone can hear me well and clearly, and as we are on the other side of the world. We are, as Isabel said, in half a lockdown, and I hope you are better with your situation. We are slightly getting out of our, hopefully, the third and last curve. But we're here, and let's change subjects and talk about feathers.
Absolutely. So you are, where are you? Tell us first where you are.
Okay, I'm based in Florence, and now I am my atelier here in Florence, Tuscany, in the middle of Italy. And as you can see in the background, I have made a little screen of the screen of Florence. This is the actual feather part of what you can see when you look at our city. Now, this is something we have made for pleasure, basically, because we work feathers. And now I will tell you more about what does working feathers mean. Like we've just been hearing that it's a long art that started probably as an art in the Renaissance, but as Irene said, it was something that started in other parts of the world long before that. Now, in order to introduce you to this fascinating material, I would like to make you aware of the fact that probably this material, that is feathers, is probably one of the first useless and fabrics that mankind has used. By useless, it sounds like an unlikely, pleasurely word, but useless means that it doesn't, you don't need it to make anything with sense. It means you wear a coat, or you wear, in the prehistoric ages, people would dress themselves to feel warm. Now they would use stones to go out and hunt. They will make an arch and bow to kill an animal for food. But they didn't need to dress and put feathers in their head or anywhere else as we do today. So this means that whatever was needed for the life, for living of the humans in the prehistoric age was something that was a necessity. Now, whenever we think of feathers, we think of something that it's only there for pleasure and basically for status. Now, when the feathers got used for the first time, my little film that I imagine is that one day some caveman or woman went out on a hunt, and basically they were looking for food, which was A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, basic needs for survival. Now, he probably got an amazing bird, and it was an amazing meal that was going to be cooked over fire, or I don't know how, that evening. But what this hunter for the first time realized was that probably in the back, on the tail of this bird, were some amazing things called feathers that he really enjoyed. So probably naturally, for the first time in this planet, he got these feathers and he stuck them on his head and crowned himself. Now, this was something totally instinctive, but basically what happened is that when he walked back to his cave or to his village, everybody probably was amazed by the looks of this person that for the first time made what now we call the catwalk. It's a défilé, it's a fashion show. So basically what I like to represent is the fact that feathers are probably the first useless and fashionable piece of accessory that mankind has ever used. We can talk about this for hours and hours, but I like to keep this as my little secret and my little novel. And also because when you think about society in all the villages, there's always been a king and a leader. Usually the leader always had a crown. And all crowns before they invented gold, they found out diamonds and everything, was made of feathers, as we can still see in all the civilizations around the world. When the Renaissance people started looking around the world, and when Columbus went around and discovered the Americas, and they went in Brazil and they traveled all around the world in the ocean, and they found amazing birds, the first thing they brought back was the birds, of the feathers of these birds, which were amazing. And they started putting them all around. As Irene was telling us before, they started seeing things that they've never seen before. They had the feather on the head, which was the same feather that the Egyptians had on the head, that the Romans, the Julius Caesar, going around and conquering the whole world, always had an ostrich feather on his head. But they've never seen so many amazing birds and little ornaments on head, as Irene was telling us before. So they all wanted to, wanted to gather and find all these little pieces and make it their little collections. But before going on and talking about feathers for hours, which could be interesting, but unfortunately this chapter of the Isabel lesson we don't have. Maybe we could do a lecture number 2 or 3 or more. I would like to introduce you to my little studio, which, as I was telling you before, is based in Florence. Any questions so far, or?
I think, just launch in. Your story is so fascinating.
Okay, going from prehistorian and from historic man and caveman, we are jumping back to the 20th and 31st century. And the story of my business is that this company was founded by my grandmother in 1935 here based in Florence. Now, why and how does someone start to work with feathers? Now, the background of the economics in Florence was that it was a very important place where they used to make hats and straw hats. Where, as you may know, in the 30s and then the last century, when ladies went out on society, they always needed to wear a hat. And nothing more noble to have some flowers or feathers to embellish their head ornament. So in Florence, there were a lot of people doing hats and a lot of little bottegas, little places and atelier where ladies and girls, even at young age, would learn a job by doing little flowers for the ladies' hats. Now, my grandmother happened to be one of them, and apparently she was quite good. And we're talking about the 20s and the 30s of last year in Italy. Just to go back in a fast way, we are between 2 wars. We have a fascist empire who is dealing on us every day. There was no freedom. It was very difficult. We were a third world country. We can basically almost admit that. And we're struggling with surviving every day. But beauty has always been something that, and the people in this country and everywhere was in a background. So my grandmother apparently was quite good at doing these little flowers that someone just tried to convince her to go on her own. But she had no money. So she had the tools, but she didn't have the means. And what happened was, like this, I like to tell the story, was that she was fiancée with my grandfather to be, and his uncle played the lottery 2 numbers and won something like 10 cents. That at the time was still very low, but it was enough for her to start her business. She had the capital. So with this little coin, she basically managed to buy a piece of fabric to make the fabric flowers, and she bought some feathers to make the little ornaments for the hats. And in 1935, the company was started. Now, more than 80 years have passed. My grandmother, unfortunately, is not here long with us. And she passed it at a certain point to my father, who worked in here and still comes to work every day. He's 81 years old. He's not here, so I can tell. But he comes every day to work, because when you're an artisan and you work something, it's in your heart and you do it such in a good spirit that it's basically your life. We are unfortunately linked to our works. And when we talk about going in pension or stopping our job, it's something that I don't think we'll ever do. Anyways, I'm the third generation.
you were not always, you didn't go straight into the business, did you?
No, I started working here. Thanks for asking. I started here in the business because when I was a kid after school, I used to come and help my father and my grandfather to count the feathers, cut them, do little things. And so I started absorbing this featherly feeling. I went through high school. I studied in Florence, and still I was coming to work whenever possible or needed. Of course, you need to have a little summer job and earn a little money. And putting my head into the family business was always a pleasure. Then at a certain point at university ages, I tried to fly away. You always use words with feathery interests. And I flew to UK, I flew to US, trying to see the world and discover everything. But after 3-4 years of living around, I realized that my destiny was here. And so I came back to Florence and I got back to the business, and I basically started working again here, as I have never stopped with my brain. And also because I realized that after doing various jobs, that these 10 things that we have on our hands, these 10 fingers, are one of the most fun things to use. And these tools are capable of doing so many things. So I love using these things. And I came back to Florence and I started working in the business. Now it's more than 25 years that I'm back here. And I must say that I really enjoyed it. The company has changed, and it's a constant evolution. It changes for the market, it changes for the clients and everything we do, but still we work in this niche market. Now, to stop a bit the conversation, I would like to introduce you, and I'll take you to have a little tour, if that is fine, of the business so that we can see what we can do with feathers. Like here on this side, this is one of the plumets that the Pope's guards, the Swiss guards of the Pope, wear every day since the 16th century. Now, these are 3 ostrich feathers curled together, and they're put on this little helmet. And this is something that we do since 1956. So we are still the suppliers of the Vatican for these helmets. But besides doing that, we work a lot in the fashion world. So fashion means headbands and strange things to put on the head. Now, as you can see here, these are all headdresses or fascinators or headbands. I don't know. There are many ways of calling them, but it's all pieces for the heads that you can wear around.
What kind of feather are we talking about?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I forgot to tell. Feathers. These feathers are chicken feathers. Now, nowadays, when we're talking about all the feathers we see in catwalks and these amazing red carpets and everything, they're all feathers that come from birds that have been eaten. So it's a byproduct, it's a throwaway product, it's a total recycle from our industry. What we're talking is turkey, and in the States, they use a lot, surely, and chicken, and that all around the world, and goose, which are the 3 feathers we use the most. Then we also have more specific feathers like the one of the guinea hen and all the pheasants as Isabel's earrings. But that is a very small percentage. Basically, what we usually use is turkey, chicken, and duck. So these are the animals that get processed every day. And so a small, very small protection part of the production gets used for the feather business. It's probably 0.0000001.
Do you ever use synthetic feathers?
So anyways, feathers are...
Duccio, do you ever use synthetic feathers? Looks like we've lost him a little bit. He might come back. I hope so. I assume that he's stuck for all of you. Irene, is he also? Yeah. Okay.
So he's gone now. So maybe it's worth.
He will come back. I just find wonderful the idea that it was started by his grandmother, and she won the lottery. I mean, that's quite amazing. And we're going to see. He was telling us the other day. You're going to see how he makes.
Am I back with you?
The bust. Here you are.
Okay. So I'm
Nice.
walking down the stairs, and I'm going to turn around the camera so that I will introduce you to our showroom. So this is basically...
Duccio, before you go there was one question. Do you ever use synthetic feathers?
No, we do not. We only use natural items. And by natural, we mean feathers that come from birds. Of course, the birds are all, as I said before, they're all industrially used, basically processed, and they're in our supermarkets. But the feathers are thrown away. So a small percentage gets reused. Difference is for the ostriches. Ostriches come all from South Africa. And ostrich feathers look like this. Okay? Maybe you have seen one of these feathers around. Now, we receive them in boxes of kilos and kilos, and then we process them. But the question is, how do we get from one of these things down to an ostrich boa?
Do you receive them dyed, or do you do the dyeing yourself?
No, we do the dyeing ourselves and receive everything natural. So now we'll have a very small lecture on how we get from a feather to a boa. Okay, so Monica here is showing us how we do this. And as you see, we get a feather, which is one of these, and we have to open it. So the feather gets stripped on both sides, keeping a small part of the feather, and they get placed on these racks here. Okay, so we have to cut the little edge off. And now they get placed all one up to the other on these little trails that my grandfather actually built.
Is it a chain? What is it?
No, it's a piece of bronze, and it's made with all these little, it's like a comb, which the ones that you brush your hair. But so what happens is we put them on these little combs, and we put more plies and plies. Then what happens is that we have out this piece. Now this piece gets transferred onto these little wooden marks. So we put these layers on these wooden pieces, and then we have to apply them so that it goes on, and we have to transfer them to the sewing machine. So when this goes on, now we'll have this part. Now, all these little wooden pieces shaped things were constructed by my grandfather in the 1960s. And this was one of the moments in which the company made his industrial markup. And basically from producing 1 to 2 meters a day, we were able to produce 30, 40 meters of product a day. Now, these little pieces of wood go on the sewing machine, and it's a single stitch. And now we go. So when this is out, what we have is an almost ready boa. This, what happened is that we passed from a feather to this part here.
Can
now
you
next...
here we go.
Okay, so this is what happened. And the next step is basically this, which is like here. Now we found a different colored one, and we're going to twist it. So basically this from being flat gets twisted and becomes a round. Sorry, I'm moving fast, but I have to go around, and they get twirled. So when these get twirled, they become a boa. This machine is like a giant drill. Now, what happens next? Basically, being such a natural element and material, and being twirled when they're a little bit wet, basically they dry holding the turns in, and basically they dry in the same position. So it's like when you do bigodini. It's like when you put hair, come si chiamano? The curlers.
Curlers in your...
Curlers, exactly. So basically as they're wet, you curl them and then you let them dry. And so what happens is that after, when they're dried, the boa looks like this, and it doesn't untwirl anymore. Now, this is technically very easy for us, and it's very challenging for someone who's never seen it. But the most interesting thing that I wanted to point out in all this process is that what we're doing is all natural. All that we're doing is the same way it's been done for centuries, and nothing different has applied besides the wooden machines that my grandfather built, besides the electric drill that we do now. But basically, what I want to point out is that the same material has been used the same way for centuries. Nothing has changed. When you will use a feather object, you're working with something that has no impact on nature, because there's no glue, nothing applied to it. It's not cotton thread or only boas and feathers. So it's a very natural element.
So Duccio, who is buying boas? Because I mean, I love fashion, but I can't see myself strutting around Toronto with a boa around my neck.
Well, we have a widespread variety of customers nowadays, and sorry, I have to wear my mask because I'm in places with other people. And nowadays, as you can see, we are working with the most important fashion brands in the world. Like last night at the Grammys, we had a Dolce & Gabbana worn by, I don't remember the name of her.
But opened the Grammys wearing a green feather boa. And
exactly.
he won best, yeah.
Well, see, you see them all, great. Thanks, Jane. And basically, we supply feathers. This is a bit of our Hall of Fame, but I mean, actually, if you go on Instagram, it's easier. So today we are working with, yeah, sure, I can say with Dolce & Gabbana. We're working with Gucci. We're doing accessories for Louis Vuitton. And these boas we're working here now, they're from another minor designer here in Italy. And so basically we work for the most fashionable Bottega Veneta. Here it's all the production. Of course, this is all hidden in things that I couldn't say, I couldn't share, but no one will see anything. With feathers, you can do anything. I have students and I have a lot of designers. Let's see if you recognize who this is. It's a kind of a Marilyn sketch. I have students that come here very often to work with feathers, because as I was telling you before, this is a very rare job. There's only 3 companies in Europe that work feathers like mine. So no one knows about feather makers. When people ask me what's my job and I say I do feathers, they're like, what? It's very difficult to comprehend what it is. So I need to explain and tell people, as I am doing now with you.
So when you receive the feathers, I guess that where do they come? Where do they come from?
Okay, as I was telling you before, all ostrich feathers come from South Africa, and that's probably 60–70% of the supply that we get. All the rest of the feathers, which are turkey, goose, and chicken, are usually coming from Asia, because that's where they still pluck them by hand in many places, and where we can select the feathers, because out of a bird, we don't use all the feathers. Like from the chicken, we use the neck and the tail. So what happened was that in the 50s and in the 60s, my grandfather used to go around the countryside, and to people who had chickens and animals, or maybe vast majorities of had like a lot of poultry, he would go there and say, okay, I'm coming back next month. When you are plucking the feathers from the birds, the nicest long feathers from the tail or the neck, just put them in this bag. Then at the end of the month, we will go there, select them, take them home, wash them, and use them. So it was like a recycling the peel of an apple, basically.
Yeah.
And nowadays, of course, we need sourcing that are major. And since we use about 50–60 kilos of feathers a month, we need big suppliers that can supply that. And still the only place that can supply these feathers is, for the moment, Asia. We are looking to recreate a line of suppliers in Italy. In fact, I just contacted last year, and we had the COVID pandemic in the middle. It kind of got out of hand. But I contacted a lot of poultry dealers and producers here in Italy, especially biological and in very biodynamic farms, to try to recreate a supply of feathers which could be at chilometro zero, come si dice, at a clothesline.
Mm-hmm. When did, so there's two questions from Kathy. One is, when did feathers start being used for bedding? And the second one is, when the fashion houses come to you, do they give you a design or do you create the design for them?
Okay, for the first question, bedding, it's a total different thing from my work. I am not sure when it started, but probably it started very early because feathers, everybody always had feathers around. Every farm, every person always had chickens around their house. And when you pluck them, you put them inside, and feathers are comfortable and they're warm. I mean, imagine how warm they are. Imagine that when we go out skiing or we go out in the cold, or imagine up in Canada now, it shouldn't be too warm, but you wear down jacket because feathers are naturally created to keep the animal warm. So I don't know when the beds were created, but I'm sure that someone used to use them a long time ago. And for us, how do stylists approach us if they send us drawings? I should say yes, but 90% they have no clue what they want. So basically how it works is that we create samples and ideas daily, weekly, and we have our collection portfolios, and we send them out for them to take a look and get ideas. From that, we start, and then we slowly approach and get back to those amazing dresses that you see down on catwalks.
And the feathers are sent to you, they are clean. On there, you don't have to clean them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Feathers are, of course, for international trade, feathers need to be sanitized and they need to be cleaned and they need to be washed at high temperatures with special, because of course, being a natural material, they could bring diseases or anything else. And being me, myself, the first person to open the boxes, I am personally want to be assured that all the procedures are made and taken in for the feathers to be absolutely washed. But after that, we always rewash everything. And besides, when we dye them, it's a bath of hot water and soap, and then we put acid. Nothing bad because it's acetic acid, which is basically something that would not too polluting, and that cleans out of any other bug or anything else it could be in the feathers.
And the dye is natural, or is it? How do you get the color? I mean, what do you use? Because the colors we see behind you are unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Let's go in the dining room. So it's. I think we don't have. So no, it's like a little bathtub. So we go in here and we put them in the bathtub and we put them in, and then we put the water and the soap. And then when we dry them, these are like ostrich feathers before being dried. Then in order to dry them, the funny part is that beside doing a centrifugate and spin them basically, then what we do is, Antonio, metti a sbattere fuori. Okay, this is the most fun part. Antonio is going to show us. Because feathers need to be brought out. So basically, my grandfather invented this little machine, which is spins the feathers and they bang on this. So basically, every time they bang, they kind of open up the fiber. Because otherwise, if you don't blow dry them or give them wind, they never open back again and they stay all dried closed. So from when it was wet, that it looked like this, okay, where the fibers are all closed, when they get the wind, their fibers come out and they come fluffy. So it's all amazing machines. It's like being in the Willy Wonka's factory. And we have to invent all these funny things to dry the feathers. But most of all, the best part of all is a little bit of wind, and you put the feathers out to dry in the heat, because being natural, that's the best thing they can handle.
Right.
So basically, this is all we do. Questions?
So, I mean, there's another thing that you mentioned when we spoke, is that one of the big clientele is the ballroom dancing crowd. Tell us about that.
Okay, yeah. It will take days to explain all my company and the variability of clients that we have. And of course, ballroom dancing, which is a huge part of our market, it's very important. Now, every ballroom dance at the end, dress at the end has a little hem with usually an ostrich boa. Now, if you think of how many people dance around the world, and we supply 3 of the most known worldwide companies that do these feather dresses based in England. So basically, we still produce about 200-300 meters of ostrich boa a week in all different colors. And so we get every day orders for, I need 8 meters in flame red or emerald green or sapphire purple or navy blue or whatever. So we have to dye and supply and do. So we're very fast at doing this, and it's fun because then when you see the dresses, yes, I mean, we should all have a boa. No, I just read the thing. Boas are great. They're very warm. You want one.
Yeah.
Exactly. We started because wearing a boa it seems like a funny thing, but it's actually very, very warm. If you think that a boa scarf it costs like 1/4 or 1/5 of a nice cashmere scarf. It weighs something like 1 ounce, around 30-35 grams. And you can basically crush it and put it in a little pocket or in an envelope. And when you open it, it goes back to its natural beauty. It's amazing. And it's always warm, and it's fluffy, and it's very fashionable. So yes, we should all wear a boa.
So if
girls.
If I want to buy a boa, and unfortunately I can't come to you, so I need to know what to check. What am I looking for? What makes a good boa and what makes a crappy boa?
Okay, the quality of the feather, it's all ostrich feather usually. So if it's a long, nice little feather, it comes from ostrich. But what we're looking at is, like I showed you a little machine before, the feathers that go around. It has to be fluffy. It has to be chubby. It has to be a feather that has a nice softness to it. Sometimes if they second-hand boas or second-grade boas, basically they use the stiffer feathers, and they're harder and they're a bit sticky to it. So when you touch it, just by blowing, the feather moves around. You're almost assured it's a good boa. But then you want to touch and feel that the single feeler that comes out is all thick and full.
Right.
And then of course,
yeah.
And then when you touch it, it has to have more feathers it has inside, the more luxurious it is. Of course, it's a matter of price. So in fact, in our line of products, we sell from 1 ply, which means we only put 1 little feather inside, to the 12 ply boas, which means we put 12 feathers, attach one on the other before putting them on my grandfather's wooden cradle that then gets sewn.
Wow.
Right. There's a question from Kathy who says, how do you identify your boas? I mean, how do we know that it's one of yours?
We usually do only ostrich boas. There are many other boas made by turkey feather and goose feather, which are a bit smaller and cheaper. Our point in making boas is that usually what happens in the market is that people buy boas made either in South Africa or in Asia, and then they dip dye them in color. So they usually come in 1 color. Now, what we do is, since we produce them and we create them ourselves, what we like to do is put more colors inside. So if you buy a boa and you see that it has more than 1 color at the same time, it means likely it's coming out of our little atelier.
And how do I'm now I want to buy a boa. I think it's going to have to be white. I don't know why. How do I make sure that it, stays in good condition? What are the enemies of the boa? Is there any
Yes.
pest or?
Enemies. It's like a woolen sweater. When you put it away, you should put it with a little, it used to be naphthalene but now you have all these little ointments that you put inside, or little woolen sticks or oils, or those anti-moth things that you put in your wardrobe, because the moths are very happy to eat feathers because they're very tasty and juicy. It's a protein. In little facts, since they're proteins and we are throwing away daily millions and millions of bird feathers, they are thinking about using them to make flowers because it's basically protein. As we are thinking in the future to eat insects or other things, why not use something that we're throwing away, proteins that come directly from feathers? So I know that they're studying and they're basically doing flowers that they then feed for animal purpose. But I don't know if we're going to ever eat a feather flower bread. I don't think so. Yeah. Yeah. But they can be used in different ways.
Kathy is asking, would you say that feathers are delicate or resilient? They look so delicate, but you really work them in cleaning, drying, and all that.
No, they are the most the strongest natural fiber, I must say. Everybody, of course, thinks that feathers are very delicate, but just think of those geese that fly from Siberia to Central Africa for 5,000 miles up in the sky, and these birds don't eat, don't do anything. They fly only, and they have to, they do all that because of the feathers. So the feathers need to be perfect, resistant, and shape. So the evolution on feather has basically based everything. If you think of the colors that feathers have on birds and the resistance that they have, it's absolutely astonishing. From a penguin, which is a kind of bird that goes up in Antarctica and stays for 6 months and minus, I don't even remember how many Celsius. And he's isolated from those feathers, but then he goes in the water and they protect him and make them go around to the other bird, which is, I don't know, any other big flyer of the world. And these birds fly with these same feathers, which is this little appendices of our bodies that really make a difference. It's more evoluted hair or the birds have, and then the colors.
So going back to the pest, one of the things I was told from a textile artist is that if you have any moth or anything, or you think you might have eggs in your sweaters or your scarves or whatever, put it in the deep freeze for a couple of weeks. Can we do that with the feathers too?
Sure, absolutely. Nothing will happen. I mean, feathers resist everything. Feather was little tails. Feather was considered to be the uniqueness and perfection item, like from the Egyptians. And still, when they find in the open mummies, they find that next to the pharaohs, there's always a feather, because feathers were something absolutely important, as we can see in many drawings and many figures. You maybe remember that one of the most Egyptian figures is that of a scale, and on the side there's a feather, on the other side there's a round thing, which is the heart, because the feather represented the weight over soul. So basically, he had a very important, almost religious idea. Then if you think of all the parts the feathers retain in our image, like the dream catchers are basically but a net with some feathers around. And then, of course, feathers get into all our stories and all our information, from movies and everything around. If you think Forrest Gump starts with a feather falling down to Tom Hanks, and it starts to tell. If you think about Dumbo, the elephant from Disney, he flies because he has a feather. So these feathers are really magic. American Indians have really got the idea of what feathers were, and in fact they were full of feathers and they worshipped them, and feathers are part of the medicine man or the cure of everything. They're not dead, they're really alive. They have always something to say to you.
What's your favorite feather color or from a bird? I mean, what is your magic, what is your mysticism about feather?
Well, I think that one single ostrich feather is just pure greatness. I mean, just imagining that one of these little things here, nice and fluffy, I think it's adorable. It's great. It's brilliant.
What about feathers and men in accessories for men? Or do you wear a boa, Duccio?
I don't wear a boa, but I do wear feathers around. But the interesting thing is that feathers were until probably the 17th, 18th century, something that only men wore, because feathers were the head pieces of the chief. So only men could have access to feathers because they were worn by soldiers, by generals. Every general in any army here around Europe always had a boa on the head. If you think about Napoleon, also had his ostrich feather in the head. Julius Caesar and all the Romans had feathers on the head, but any other. And if you think even if down in South America, all the Amazonian cultures, they always had feathers and things in their head. And they're all worn by men because, unfortunately, men was, I don't know why, thought to be the chief of the village. But anyways, that's finally changing, and we're looking at that. And what happened, interestingly, with the feathers is that until men wore feathers until the 17th, 18th century, they only wore them in one single way, stuck in the head, going up, and that was all we could ever think about. But then when women start wearing feathers, and that happened besides the big royalness or very smart cultural people like Margarita, as we were hearing before, they started collecting them. But the first people really to wear out feathers were the ballerinas of the Opéra de Paris in the 17th, 18th century. And the 18th, 19th century. And basically out of the theater, they would kind of take a pick of men and wear feathers at the bottom of their skirts and through the dance of the can-can trying to fool them. And of course they did, because then they started with wearing the men's ornaments, and slowly they started wearing them on stage and then outside, and then they start wearing them after evening parties. And slowly in 1 century, feathers now are everywhere and used in thousands of different ways and more interesting. And
Kathy is saying that women wore white feathers as debutantes. That's right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a sign of purity. So it had to be that. Definitely. No, feathers are linked. If you look around in fashion and history, they have so many meanings that you can find them everywhere. One of the tales of many kinds, like one that I like to say, I work a lot with students because, sorry, I'm going inside because it's kind of chilly. So it's one of the tales that I like to say is that on the Titanic, the boat that eventually sank last century, one of the most important cargoes in the back that was insured by the Lloyd's company was a huge parcel of feathers, which was even more valuable than any other jewel. So when if they had to remake the movie of the real story of the Titanic, instead of going down to look and search for a jewel, they would have to go down and look for a bag of feathers.
Well, I think that brown boa that was behind him just now is a good color for you. Did you see?
The brown boa?
Yes,
this goes, no, this is ballroom dancing. This is called Coco. This is called forest green. They all have these amazingly names. Usually they come out of this Swarovski diamond collection because they are the ones that put the most. And then all the colors go with it. But I mean, colors. It's just a whole bunch of colors around of things, and
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Questions, please. Ask me something.
I'm sure there are questions. Nancy.
I just going to say the no smoking sign behind Duccio.
Don't you love this?
Feathers. I love it. Yes,
okay,
feathers.
Because this company is quite old. I mean, we've been in this location since 1970 when my father changed the company and moved out here in the outskirts of Florence. Now it's downtown, but 50 years ago it was kind of out. Since then, we haven't changed much. The machines have changed a little bit, but basically we have all the girls that come here and work. And we're now a team of 11 people, and many of them, I mean, some of them, as the girls you've seen before, have been working here for 35, almost 40 years. And all the other girls and men, also have a lot of boys, are students. They come here to try to see if they like that, and they fall in love with this material. As I say, because I work a lot with schools and get students for stages every semester if I can. And they all want to apply because they all want to come and work here. But then when they come here, I kind of have them select themselves, because they think they all want to come over here. But then when they come and they see that it's not Gucci, it's not Ferragamo, it's not Armani, it's not Prada, because that's what coming out of a fashion school you want to go out. They come here and they see that it's like this funky place with all these feathers around, and some of them just turn around and go back, but some of them just adore, and they go home and then they call me and I say, I think that was the most amazing place I've ever seen. I wish I could come and help you and work there. So some of them who really love this material come back, and then eventually they come and be part of the team.
And you still, you refer to the girls, but they have a very, there's a very specific name.
Yeah, we've had already this conversation with Isabel, so she knows a bit more about all the stories. And as my grandmother will call them, because the girls used to come and work here when they were very young as girls, and the girls in Italian is bambine, which is bambini. Now, which happened because the girls would come here and work when they were like 10, 12, 13, 14. I mean, we're talking about the 30s and the 40s and the 50s of last century. Mm-hmm. So my grandmother and my grandfather used to call them bambine, and then they were called bambine if they grew up. And then my father would call them bambine. And then when I came up, they were called bambine. So the girls that work here, even if they're older than me or whatever, they're the bambine. So that's it's the nickname that they all have, and it's so much fun.
There's two questions here. One from Sharon. Does anyone ever send you their own special feathers to make something with it? And do you have a favorite painting that captures the beauty of ostrich feathers?
The painting, there are many, but usually it's the little feathers around. I don't have any image now. About the first question, there's a lot of people who find their grandma's boxes up in the in a trunk or somewhere, and they in the attic, and then they find these feathers and then don't know what to do with them. So basically they call me and we try to make out something special. So they bring sometimes I see paradise birds feathers or aeron feathers, which are now banned from commercial use. But of course, if you find them in an old box, you have to somehow get them back, to give them a second chance, because if they're there, it's a pity not to use them, because they're amazingly beautiful.
Incredible. Well, I think that, I hate to say that we've been around the world of feather, because I'm sure we haven't, but we have come to the end of our time, and we have our next visit. We're flying back to Cambridge. Duccio, it was amazing. I will share your website. I have done that already, but I will share again with everybody. Okay. I have one last question. If I'm looking for, actually, two questions. What length should a real boa be, and a great boa, how much am I looking at?
Well, you're looking between 1.5 meters and 2 yards. So between 1.5 meters to 1.8 meters, depending on your height, basically, because you have to turn it around your neck. What we tend to do now is do donuts. Basically, as a round boa, we sew it in a circular way, and that requires only 80 to 90 centimeters of boa. Then when you sew it around, you put it as a scarf on your head and it stays up. It requires less boa, so it's cheaper. It doesn't fall off, and it's quite fashionable, and it's more modern, let's say, to use.
Right. And in terms of pricing, how much are we looking at roughly?
Okay, we're looking wholesale cost. It goes out from 100 euros up to 300 from a company like mine. If you go out buying them, it's at least double than that. So you're talking at between 200 and 500 euros, at least. Fantastic. If you buy Lanvin or whatever, like the boa we saw before, I forgot, that's collier for Saint Laurent, which will be going out, and you're buying 36 centimeters. And I don't know how much you're going to make them cost, but I'm sure it's not less than 300, 400, 500.
Okay.
And it's one feet.
Definitely
but
something
of course,
you keep your whole life.
Yeah, no, but that's something, I mean, they have the cost of the company. So when you're buying big brands, of course, you're buying the whole commercial institution and the brand and everything.
Sure.
And the quality as well, because they really make sure that the quality is good. Really make sure. The quality control for these big brands, it's difficult.
Well, I think we'll come to you. We don't really need we don't quite need the brand.
Fine. So anyway.
Can we order directly from you is the question from Catherine.
Absolutely. We can do something like that. We have them online on an online shop, but if you write me back, we can do customized pieces for everyone. And it's been a pleasure. But besides this nice Zoom call, I invite you all to come to Florence. It's a wonderful town. And as you're here, just give me a buzz and come and visit me in my atelier. I will be more than happy to show you physically around what this place all looks about.
Wonderful.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Thanks for you all.
Thank you very
and
much.
Happy next lecture.
Great.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Grazie mille, grazie.
I'm leaving you now.